good evening or good afternoon, whichever time zone is that. But let's welcome our guest today, and her name is Orsika Julia, right?
Okay. Yes.
Okay, great. And we were having conversation before this, and it was very interesting that I lived in UP, and she's also UPer. And people who don't know, UPer is the upper part of Peninsula of Michigan. Really a nice place to live, and I have great memories of that place. So I am so happy to see her, knowing that she is from that place. So let's welcome Orsika. How are you doing now?
Oh my gosh, I'm so super great. We just got home about 15 minutes ago from a blizzard because I currently live in Grand Rapids and we have blizzard conditions. So it reminded me of living in the UP. And then, yeah, so I'm loving it.
Okay, great. Yeah. I think the Grand Rapids I used to whenever you had to go to Lower Michigan, of course, and I'm sure you have been to Mackinac Island many times.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a great place. If anybody didn't visit Mackinac Island, maybe you should go. That's really a nice place to visit.
I think everybody should go to Mackinac. Yeah.
Yeah, Mackinac is a great place. So today's topic is very important, and that is
Yes.
we're gonna have two sections to that, and it is so important for relationship. Actually, I was talking to her. Our first topic was for relationships, and now this topic is about a saying very important part of relationship, and that is domestic abuse. And the reason for two reasons we are approaching Valentine's, and it's important that to realize relationships have boundaries, and those are very important to realize. Anything you do should have boundaries and should have disciplines. And so let's talk a little bit about first what is domestic abuse or what.
So there's domestic abuse and there's domestic violence. And they're both when your partner, your domestic partner, intentionally will, how can I explain this? Will intentionally cause harm to you, either physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. Like it's an intended behavior.
Okay, so that is their intended behavior, and same also stands even if it wasn't unintended, but you can tell that no, it hurts, right?
Yeah. And it's funny because, some people are like, oh, I didn't mean to hurt her. But when it's a pattern, it might be a subconscious intention. So I'm not saying, the abuser is like, oh, I'm going to punch her in the face today. It's not a conscious choice, but it's still a choice from whatever they experienced that led them to that existence.
So that is very important. So what I see in relationships, it's both ways actually, but of course more between usually for men, that they don't realize that their action might hurt, or there could be something or it could be even spousal relationship, could be friend, could be colleague. Yeah, so I think first thing is very important for all of us for awareness is to say, I'm sorry, but this action hurts us,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
you can be very polite. You don't have to be, in any way, but you can be firm and you can just say, I'm sorry, but your action, your way of asking, or maybe you meant it, you didn't mean it, but it hurts us.
Right.
Right. And, it could be anything. It could be any bias, right?
Yes. And that's the important thing. So when you're in a healthy relationship, then you can say, hey, your action really hurt my feelings. But when you're in a domestic abuse situation, then the partner's not going to listen more often than not, right? Oftentimes abusers are narcissists. Not all narcissists are abusers, but oftentimes abusers are narcissists. And so they're out for their own agenda. So you can say, like, again, in a healthy relationship, what you did yesterday or what you just did 20 minutes ago really hurt my feelings. But oftentimes the abuser will be like, that's your problem, because they're self-serving and they don't care about the other person's feelings.
Mm-hmm. And that is so true. So absolutely. So in that context, but I'm sure those have also probably originated or gone bad after some time. So maybe I'm talking about the really initial phase. Maybe Because I think one thing I see is many times, especially females will ignore some of these,
Oh, absolutely.
and they will say maybe he or she will change, but that doesn't happen.
No, and that's where boundaries are so important, right? And I allowed my boundaries to not exist, and that's how I ended up in an abusive situation. I had low self-esteem, and I didn't set those boundaries, and I didn't say this is acceptable behavior and this is not acceptable behavior, because had I said that, then I'm 100% certain that I wouldn't have stayed for almost 5 years. Had
Yeah.
I said that in the beginning, I would have been like, you know what, I'm out. Your behavior is juvenile. But I didn't understand the concept of boundaries at that point, especially in a domestic relationship. I just didn't understand it. And, no matter how old you are, it's okay to give yourself grace to not understand the dynamics of certain relationships.
Mm. And I always find, I have interviewed few, domestic abuse survivors, and one thing is they always like to share is that they wish that they had done something earlier, or they should have consulted or talked to their friend or somebody, or well-wisher or anyone.
Mhm.
So, I think it's very important to realize it's not a normal thing, and
Right.
it should never be. But I understand some of maybe relationship, they think it's part of it, but it's not. Right?
Yeah,
So
that's not healthy.
yeah, it's not healthy, and then so those are very important. Now, let's also talk about, what do you think actually makes it more vulnerable? Let's say, is it some habits, or is it maybe, let's say, somebody is drinking, somebody is having these gambling issues, or somebody, does that make it work?
Well, so interestingly enough, when I was with the abuser, when he was drinking, he was actually nicer.
Oh,
So
okay.
which is really backwards, because oftentimes what you're saying is totally true, that the alcohol or the gambling or the whatever else is what triggers the the misbehavior, the bad decisions. And so, yeah, my situation was just very unique in that when he was drinking, then he was actually nicer. So I would oftentimes hand him a drink because I couldn't deal with the reality of who he was, without the alcohol. And so I would just hand him a drink and go. But
Mm,
usually the alcohol and gambling and those addictive personalities exasperate the behaviors for sure.
mm. And also, it's important to realize that, it is kind of universal. Unfortunately, domestic abuse, violence, we have seen all cultures, some more, some less, and it's been, prevalent. And yes, you're right. Drinking, gambling, maybe extramarital affairs, cheating, all can make it uh, a kind of trigger. But the problem with behavior is there already.
Right.
Those could be triggers, but so let's say if normal person loses job, or they have financial hardship, or they're drinking, not everybody will be having those issues. So yes, those can be triggered, but we have to understand the problem is the pattern. The problem is the behavior itself is wrong.
Right. And
Right.
that behavior and that pattern started not just when, you know, my my situation. So in my situation, the pattern didn't just start when we met, right? The
Uh-huh.
pattern had been there for years and years and years. So it's really important for people to understand that this is a problem that the abuser is having internally. So let it be upbringing, whatever happened in their life, right? Or let it be brain damage, because oftentimes, there could be brain damage and then that jars the brain and all of a sudden they're not behaving appropriately. So I know that most people want to throw those stones at the abuser, but if you look at them as the human that they're created to be, and you really delve into their past, then oftentimes you can see what I'm not condoning their behavior. Please understand, it is not okay, right? But
Yeah,
if you look at them from a human perspective, then you can see what triggered them to lead them into how they're treating other people. So most commonly, their self-respect is zero. Because if they had any self-respect, they wouldn't behave in the ways that they behave. So what caused their self-respect to be, you know, like below sea level, basically?
Mm.
And if you can grasp that, then you can see it from a more human side. And it's easier to forgive yourself for putting yourself in that abusive situation and the abuser for abusing. And forgiveness is really the key to healing completely. Yeah.
Okay, and actually that is true. But we'll talk also about. So I think also tell us a little bit. Since it's first of all, I would like to basically appreciate that you came on this show and sharing. It means a lot. It means a lot. I mean, you need a lot of guts and strength to share that painful memories and share that for good of people, so to understand, so nobody else in your situation, or maybe hopefully not, but somebody is in that, they realize that this is wrong, and then they need to get a help, not have problem like the experience you had, right? So that's the whole point.
Absolutely.
So tell us what thing you think, if you look back, I'm sure hindsight is 2020. So
Always.
if we look back, what things you think you could have done a little different?
Well, definitely, like I mentioned before, set those boundaries. And let me just back up here real quick. I just really appreciate being invited onto this
Mhm.
podcast. Tremendously appreciate it because it is important to speak as a domestic abuse survivor to other domestic abuse survivors,
Mhm.
because we have entirely, as a culture, I guess even worldwide, honestly,
Yeah.
when you're a domestic abuse survivor, nobody speaks of it. It's very hush hush.
Mm.
And how can we heal others and how can we help others come out of that quicksand if we're not willing to speak about it? So, anyway, that all being said, boundaries. If I would have accept appreciated boundaries a little bit better, then I would have been able to avoid a lot.
Mm. Mm. And that is true. So awareness, boundaries, and then other thing is self value.
Right.
Basically value yourself. No one, no human being, or not even animal, nobody deserves, so that there are values for everyone. Everybody is unique. Everybody should be well respected, and everybody, it doesn't matter what your ethnic background is, what colors you have, what religion you have, we all should have respect boundaries, and we should respect it. People can have opinions, but you cannot go below a certain level, right?
Absolutely. Yes. And that's, self respect and boundaries, those two things. I wish I would have respected myself more and I wish I would have set boundaries.
Mm.
But if I would have done that, I wouldn't be in the situation. And so I wouldn't be able to help those who are either in it or just getting out of it, or have been out of it for 8 years and still feel lost and like they're in survival mode, because that does happen. People get out of abusive situations and they're just in survival mode
Mhm.
for a multitude of years and they don't know how to get out of that pattern. So,
That's right. And also tell me a little bit about what was helpful and what wasn't so helpful.
as far as getting out of the situation,
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Mhm.
um, what was helpful, I had a great support system. So, my family was very supportive. They knew before I did, they knew before I admitted the red flags. So when it was time to get out, they were extremely supportive and they were like, what can we do? How can we help? You can move here, here, and here, because my family is spread throughout the US. So that was very, very helpful. Um, what wasn't helpful was living in the abuse and living for fear of my life. The system, as we hear often, is broken, but it's broken on both sides. So by no means am I saying, oh, I'm the one who was abused and I should be protected 100% all the time, because there are people who play the victim role,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But what wasn't helpful was once I got out of the situation and I went to group counseling in a women's shelter,
Mhm.
I didn't know what the next steps were. There wasn't like a now what, to heal more effectively. So I had to really pave my own path.
Mhm. So tell me about, you said your parents, your family they were supportive. What about your friends?
They were supportive too.
They were.
Absolutely. Yes, 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 yes.
And then were you able to find resources like who to call? You say you had maybe shelter place or.
I did. Actually, there were a lot of resources. And I honestly didn't want to admit that I was in a domestic abuse situation. I just knew that it was bad and I needed to get out. So I didn't go to the domestic abuse hotline because there is a domestic abuse hotline. I didn't call them because I had the great support system. So I ended up just reaching out to local organizations from where I was living in the Chicago area, asking for help with, setting up first and last month's rent and car insurance and that kind of stuff that was not in the budget at the time, but I needed car insurance to get to work. So there's plenty of resources out there for the immediate help.
Okay. Also, I want to ask you, you think you were able to find, shelter, of course, but let's talk a little bit. I think very important point you mentioned about is finances. So what is important about is for everybody who's listening and also watching is make sure, you have some kind of money with you for rainy day. Could be, I hope you don't have the abuse situation, but could be anything. But you should have these resources only known to you.
Yep.
And that is where a lot of abuse survivors actually they cannot get out because they are financially totally dependent, and then there's nothing they can do.
Right. That is so true. And it's so important to make a plan. So, abuse doesn't just happen overnight. Like the
Yeah.
person doesn't, I shouldn't say it doesn't. That's a horrible broad brushing, but more often than not, abuse isn't like, oh, all of a sudden he punched me in the face. It slowly adds on and adds a snowball effect, right? And
Mm.
so when you see that snowball starting to roll down the hill, then take the action steps and start making a plan. So by all means, have a little cash stashed away. Definitely contact the authorities. What helped me is I went to the sheriff's department and I
Mhm.
said, this is what happened to me last night. I am planning on moving my children and myself out of state. What do I need to do?
Mhm.
And they said, get yourself to safety and we'll discuss it afterwards. So a lot of times the women and the men, because men get abused as well, they don't have a plan of action. They just want to get out. But if you have the opportunity to build a plan of action, let the authorities know that you're leaving and let them know why.
And so those are, yeah, and also like to know a little bit about some of the problems. You said some areas where you were in that Chicago area, and was there difficulty in getting county or usually it's a little more process, social service get involved and they come and then they so was that a problem or getting the was that also I would like to ask you, was there some in your case physical abuse or no?
There was. Yep, there
You
absolutely
had
was.
injury, yeah, sorry to hear, but also you had injuries or.
No, no, actually, I was raped.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and there wasn't, so basically at the time it happened in Oklahoma, and I went to the sheriff's department
Mhm.
to let them know I was leaving, and then I got to safety and I wrote my statement, and they took the statement to the DA, the assistant DA, and they basically told me, I think the words were something to the effect of, I don't want to quote it and misquote it, but the words were, because you guys were married, you were his property, he could do with it you whatever he wanted to.
Oh my God.
And I was like, oh, okay, so now I'm property. I didn't realize that we were, as Americans, in that state of mind. But then as I'm doing the work that I'm doing, I see it more and more often. It's like, oh, you're property,
Yeah,
in
and
the South.
Yeah, that is so sad, and that is why it's important actually to realize that there are boundaries for even spousal relationship. There is not that you can. Nobody is each other's property. No one.
No.
And other problem which I have heard and is that um, they don't have anybody to do examinations.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, so is that true?
So I didn't get an exam because, again, he was my spouse. So there wasn't, they were like, well, how do we know that it wasn't consensual? Well, because by word should be enough. And okie dokie then. But I don't know how the testing is now. Um, yeah, there's probably not enough testing,
Yeah,
honestly.
there's not enough testing, and there's also, yeah, it's sorry to bring back all
No,
those.
it's okay.
Uh,
This is what helps others. It's okay.
okay, okay, I didn't mean to do
No,
that.
it's truly
So,
okay.
okay. So, also like to know, do you think it was, the police or the DA wasn't so helpful? And I guess that explains why we do these kind of programs. To first of all, to realize again and again that nobody is anyone's property, not even your pets. Okay, so they are not your property. You cannot abuse your pet either. So forget the your spouse is human, so that's not even you can't even think. But that's how the problem is. That's how the culture is. Okay, it's not specific to any religion, race, or anything. Unfortunately, it is cultural thing, in my opinion. Is that
I think so. Yeah, I think so. The culture down where we were in Oklahoma, it's very the boys club. Are you
uh
familiar with that? Yeah, it's very like,
yeah, I
oh
know.
wow. Yeah, so one of the abuser's close friends was the assistant DA and saw the name come through and is like, so it's just the good old boys club. Is that what it's called? Yeah. And so a lot of the legalities happened that way in Oklahoma until I brought everything up to Illinois.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, buddy, now we're on my stomping grounds, So then things shifted, and I was able to find a lawyer pro bono because they're out there and they want to help. So I found a lawyer pro bono that was helping me get my first PPO on the abuser, and that was amazing. And then when I moved to Michigan, I ended up with 2 more PPOs against the abuser. Those are personal protective orders for those
Oh,
who
okay.
don't know.
Now I understand.
And
Okay.
so, yeah, it was thankfully in the north. They're a little bit more user friendly, and they take your word for it. And they're trained more, I believe, in understanding the body language of the abused.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, so then also I would like to know, do you, I think we mentioned a little bit about there are different regulations each state. So tell me a little bit more about, I know you went through this help with certain state or jurisdiction. They didn't have very friendly rules, and we cannot believe in this age we are talking about difference in these rules and regulations. So what was you said North was helpful, and then Oklahoma and South, and those were not so friendly on that.
Yeah, they just, again, being somebody's property and saying that to somebody who's just been abused and you're fleeing for your life, literally, like that was, I can smile about it now. And in a weird comical sense, it was just like, are you guys messing with me? Like, do we really live in the US and you're telling me I'm somebody's property? Like, it was, it was mind blowing. That's why I don't think it's funny at all. But it
Yeah.
was so far fetched that I was like, am I being punked right now? It was kind of my thought process because I couldn't grasp the seriousness of being told that I'm somebody's property, right? And so definitely Oklahoma was not user friendly with that. And I have a number of Southern friends who have been in abusive situations as well,
Mm.
and they say similar things. But the North takes it much more seriously. They're much more like, we're gonna listen to her and we're gonna take her seriously, and we're going to see if there's a pattern. And with my particular situation, there was a pattern, and the pattern still continues.
Mm.
So
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, and that is, and I'm sure, hopefully, with awareness and with our, a lot of people kind of complaining and also awareness. Hopefully, they change the rules, and I'm sure somebody will get benefit from our efforts. So we would like to, of course, help as many survivors on that. So raise the voice and kind of bring attention to all these topics, so important. So tell me a little bit about how is your life now, and I think we wanted to touch a little bit post traumatic experience or post abuse survival guide.
Yeah, so life now is good. It's really great because through this situation that I was in, it took me quite a number of years to get into the personal development and understand why it's important. Because again, I didn't feel worthy of a better life. I was like, well, this is it. Like, I guess I'm just going to live this life. And through the experience, I've found what I'm supposed to do, and that's help other domestic abuse survivors realize that they do have a life after surviving that can be healthy and that can be beneficial and that can be good and that can be uplifting and that can help other people as well. So, it was really a crappy situation that I was in, and my children as well. But now, almost 10 years out of it, I can honestly say that I'm living a good life. And, doesn't mean that I'm comfortable in my house all the time because I know that nobody's going to show up. No. I mean, I have a Ring doorbell. There's security measures. I'm not going to live naively. The abuser has driven from Oklahoma up to Michigan twice unexpectedly, and has, just done some illegal things. So I'm not living in that peace every day, but I'm living a good life and I'm able to serve other people through my trauma. So that's worth it all, really, to me.
Yeah, it's very important. Stay safe because that's true. I'm sure it is still a kind of a bad experience, and you have to look out for your safety.
Yeah.
Those orders, of course, are. I'm glad, first of all, you're in better relationship. Assuming now you're happier, right?
Yes. Yes.
And that's also important to that all the survivors, there is a life after, and not everyone will be like that. So believe in relationships, and there's nothing wrong with the relationship. Problem is not relationship, but problem could be one person, or
Right. And
so.
it's really important for survivors to understand that you don't have to get out of an abusive relationship and then get into another relationship, right? As far as an intimate relationship, give yourself that time to heal. That is so, so important, because realistically, I'm not currently in an intimate relationship. I don't know if that's too much information or not, and that's because I want to continue allowing myself to heal, right? And I am in a relationship with myself, and I'm good with that. I want to be there. I don't want the complexities right now in life, right? My focus is helping others heal. So the complexities of having like a husband again is like, I'm just going to be in relationship with me and my children and my friends, and that's okay,
And that's okay. There's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Not everybody has to have, kind of, a picture perfect frame or something. You don't need to. Your relationship could be your kids, family, friends, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, right? So just, but main thing is you should be happy, and you should gain self confidence. You should believe in life again. You should enjoy things again, and those are more important.
Absolutely, yes, yes. Because then the intimate stuff and the things that you may think you want, they're actually going to fall into place, right? So when you have the self-respect, when you set the boundaries, when you're in relation with yourself, then everything else really does just fall into place.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, and so we have reached almost the end of our discussion. So, any final tips you like to share with my audience?
Well, just that if you have been in a domestic abuse situation, or you know of somebody who has been in a domestic abuse situation, there is help. Do not give up on yourself, and you do not give up on the person who's been in the situation, because we, fresh out, feel very alone, even though I had a great great support system, I still felt very lonely because the shame, the blame, and the guilt of being in that situation was really, really a heavy burden on my shoulders. But you can get out, you can live a complete life, you can live a happy life. So do not give up on yourself and do not give up on the person who's freshly out of that situation.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
yes, we pray that you continue to enjoy your life and have great life. Take care.
Thank you so much. You too. Thank you.
Take care. Take care. Bye.